Welcome to the History of Simple Things, where we delve into the fascinating history behind the little things that shape our world. Pencils are something we use almost every day without giving them much thought. But if you think about it, there's something quite striking about the typical pencil: their bright yellow color. Ever wondered why that is? Is there a reason for it, or was it just a random choice? And who started the trend of painting pencils yellow in the first place? It turns out there's a fascinating history behind this common stationery item that connects us to global trade, royalty, and innovation. So let's dig into the backstory of why pencils are yellow and discover how a simple design choice became an iconic part of the modern pencil. Before we get to the color, it's worth understanding how pencils became such an essential tool in the first place. It all starts in the 16th century when a major discovery took place in Borrowdale, England. Local miners stumbled upon large deposits of what appeared to be a very pure form of graphite. Initially, people thought it was some kind of lead, hence why we still call the pencil core lead, but it turned out to be graphite. This material was perfect for marking surfaces and quickly became highly valuable. People needed a way to handle this brittle material, so craftsmen began encasing the graphite in wooden holders, giving birth to the pencil as we know it. Over time, countries like Germany, Italy, and France began manufacturing pencils, but each had its own twist on design. It wasn't until the 19th century that pencils began to take on the form we're familiar with today, particularly with the introduction of the iconic yellow pencil. So, why yellow? The answer ties back to some interesting historical and cultural factors, particularly with a little country called Austria-Hungary and its connection to China. It all starts in the late 19th century with a man named Joseph Hardtmuth, who founded the company Koh-i-Noor in 1790 in Vienna. Hardtmuth's company quickly became one of the most respected manufacturers of high-quality pencils in Europe. But it wasn't until the 1893 World's Fair in Chicago that Koh-i-Noor introduced what would become a global phenomenon: the first yellow pencil. Here's where it gets intriguing. Koh-i-Noor wanted to showcase that their pencils were made from the finest quality graphite, which came from China. At that time, Chinese graphite was considered the best in the world. To symbolize this connection to China, and more importantly, to convey prestige and royalty, the company decided to paint their pencils a bright golden yellow color. In Chinese culture, yellow is often associated with royalty, nobility, and respect. It was an eye-catching color meant to communicate the excellence of the product. Koh-i-Noor even named their flagship yellow pencil the Koh-i-Noor, after the famous diamond, emphasizing its premium quality. The introduction of the yellow pencil was a huge success, and other manufacturers quickly took note. Soon after, many American and European pencil makers began producing their own yellow pencils. This color became a symbol of quality, particularly because of the link to the premium Chinese graphite. If you had a yellow pencil, it was seen as superior. It's kind of like how certain brands or styles today signal high status, even though you're essentially paying for the same type of product. Pencils were no different in the late 19th century. Some of the earliest adopters of the yellow pencil trend in the US included companies like Eberhard Faber, which started producing their own line of yellow pencils to compete with Koh-i-Noor. Once this became popular, it spread like wildfire across the industry. In a sense, Koh-i-Noor set the standard, and everyone else followed. But why did the color stick? A big part of that comes from the associations yellow developed over time. It wasn't just a marketing strategy anymore, it had become a symbol. The color yellow was loud and hard to miss, which worked perfectly in stores and schools where you needed pencils to stand out from the competition. And remember, this was a time when advertising was booming. Bright colors, especially yellow, naturally drew attention. The color yellow also represented more than just a connection to Chinese royalty. It began to symbolize trust and dependability. By the early 20th century, yellow pencils had come to be seen as a mark of reliability, especially when it came to quality. Manufacturers knew that people who had gotten used to seeing high-quality pencils in yellow would expect that same standard whenever they bought a yellow pencil in the future. So it wasn't just a passing fad, it was a design decision that made a lasting impression. The American pencil industry played a major role in cementing the yellow pencil as the standard. By the early 1900s, pencil companies in the United States were producing millions of yellow pencils annually, and it became the norm for school supplies. It's interesting to note that the adoption of yellow pencils was a combination of historical influence and clever branding. One of the major drivers was the growing demand for pencils in schools across the country. As more children attended public schools, there was a significant need for affordable and reliable writing tools. Pencil manufacturers in the U.S. quickly saw the yellow pencil as an opportunity to stand out in a crowded marketplace. The color, which had initially been a mark of prestige, was now accessible to the masses, but it still carried that premium association. Today, we hardly think about the color of pencils. Sure, you might come across pencils in all sorts of colors now, but the standard yellow pencil still reigns supreme. That's because it's not just about tradition or habit. There's a practical reason too. The bright yellow makes pencils easy to spot in a drawer, pencil case, or classroom. It's a color that's both functional and familiar, which is why it has stuck around for more than a century. There are also deeper psychological factors at play. Yellow is often associated with optimism, energy, and focus, all things we could use when writing or drawing. It's also a warm color that tends to put people at ease, making it a great choice for something that's so closely tied to education and creativity. So next time you grab a yellow pencil, take a moment to think about how something so small can have such a rich story behind it. From royalty to schoolrooms, the yellow pencil has been a constant companion through it all. It's a reminder that even the simplest objects around us often have stories worth telling. Today, we're going to answer many of you had asked why, how, and when pink erasers were added to the end of pencils. Let's explore the history, the technology, and why this seemingly tiny innovation made such a huge difference in the world of writing. Before erasers, pencils had their own thing going on. Pencils as we know them started emerging in the 16th century with the discovery of large deposits of graphite in England. People figured out that graphite was excellent for writing, and so the wooden pencil was born. But here's the thing. While pencils allowed for easy writing, mistakes were inevitable, and unfortunately, there wasn't an easy way to fix them. People used all sorts of creative solutions to erase pencil marks, everything from breadcrumbs, yes, bread, to bits of rubber and even sandpaper. Imagine using crumbs from your sandwich to erase a word. It wasn't exactly efficient or tidy. Enter the eraser. The very first erasers were made of natural rubber, discovered in the mid-1700s by accident. Joseph Priestley, the same guy who discovered oxygen, realized that bits of natural rubber were excellent for removing pencil marks. People started using these early rubber erasers, but they were sold separately from pencils. Erasing still felt like a whole other process, kind of clunky and disconnected from the act of writing. As time went on, pencils and erasers were becoming essential tools for writing, sketching, and drafting, but there was still one big inconvenience. You had to carry both a pencil and a separate eraser around with you. For students, artists, and writers, it wasn't the most convenient setup. Imagine juggling a pencil and a small rubber eraser while trying to keep your work clean and organized. Then in 1858, a man named Hyman Lipman had an idea. What if he combined these two tools into one? Lipman was an inventor who patented the first pencil with an attached eraser at the end. This invention seemed like a stroke of genius. You could write and erase mistakes without having to swap between tools. Lipman's idea solved a common problem of the time, and it streamlined the whole writing process. However, it wasn't an immediate success story. There were legal battles over the patent, and it took years before the concept really took off. So, you might be wondering, when exactly did the pink eraser make its debut? And why pink? Well, that story starts a bit later. After Lipman's invention in 1858, pencils with erasers became more common, but the erasers themselves varied. Most early erasers were made of natural rubber, and they weren't always the most effective. They crumbled easily, didn't last long, and sometimes left smudges rather than clean corrections. The breakthrough came in the 20th century with the introduction of synthetic rubber. In the 1920s and 30s, manufacturers began using vulcanized rubber, which was far more durable and resilient than the natural rubber erasers that came before. At this point, the mass production of erasers was beginning to take shape, and pencil companies were experimenting with different materials and designs to improve both the pencil and the attached eraser. The iconic pink eraser owes much of its existence to the Eberhard Faber Pencil Company. In the 1930s, Eberhard Faber began producing pencils with erasers made from a type of synthetic rubber that had a distinctive pink hue. These erasers worked better than their predecessors. They didn't crumble as easily, erased cleanly, and left fewer smudges. The pink color wasn't a deliberate design choice at first. It just happened to be the result of the type of pumice used in the manufacturing process. But the color stuck, and over time it became the standard eraser color we know today. So why did pink erasers become so popular, and why did they stay that way? For one, they were effective. The pink erasers attached to pencils were tough enough to erase graphite marks without tearing the paper, and their slightly gritty texture gave them just the right amount of bite to lift marks cleanly off the page. But there was another reason for their widespread adoption. They were marketed as reliable and affordable. By the mid-20th century, companies like Eberhard Faber had established themselves as trusted pencil manufacturers, and they knew how to sell their products. Their pink erasers became synonymous with quality and reliability, and soon, almost every pencil you could buy had that same pink eraser at the top. It became a symbol of convenience and efficiency, a small but powerful addition to the writing process. While the classic pink eraser has stood the test of time, it wasn't the end of the road for eraser innovation. Over the years, pencil and eraser technology continued to evolve. By the 1980s and 90s, we started to see a variety of erasers, from kneaded rubber for artists to vinyl and plastic erasers designed to erase more precisely without damaging the paper. Still, the pink eraser remains the gold standard for most everyday uses. It's nostalgic, practical, and it just works. Interestingly, some pencils today come without erasers, especially high-end art pencils. Artists often prefer to use separate erasers that give them more control. But for the rest of us, the pink eraser is as much a part of our daily writing lives as the pencil itself. So, how did the pink eraser come to be such a vital part of the pencil? It started with a simple problem. People needed a better way to erase mistakes. Inventors like Hyman Lipman paved the way by combining the pencil and the eraser. But it wasn't until manufacturers like Eberhard Faber introduced the pink eraser that the idea really took off. The pink eraser, originally just a byproduct of synthetic rubber manufacturing, became an enduring symbol of writing and correction. It's funny how something so small, just a pink eraser at the end of a pencil, can make such a big difference in our daily lives. Whether we're jotting down notes, drawing, or solving math problems, That little pink eraser has our backs when we make a mistake. And that's a history worth remembering. The story of the fountain pen is as intricate as the tool itself, weaving through centuries of human ingenuity and relentless pursuit of convenience. To truly appreciate the development of the fountain pen, we need to begin by acknowledging the basic human need to record thoughts, ideas, and information, something that dates back to ancient civilizations. Long before the fountain pen came into existence, people relied on crude implements such as reeds, feathers, and sharpened sticks to write. These early writing tools would be dipped into ink and used to scratch letters and symbols onto clay, parchment, or papyrus. While effective for their time, these instruments were cumbersome, requiring constant redipping and producing uneven lines depending on how much ink was absorbed by the writing surface. The idea of a self-contained writing instrument, a pen that could hold its own supply of ink and release it smoothly, was yet to be realized. Fast forward to the 10th century, when the first primitive version of the fountain pen is believed to have made its appearance. Historical records show that the Fatimid Caliph of Egypt, Al-Mu'izz, requested a pen that wouldn't stain his hands or clothes, which resulted in the creation of a rudimentary fountain pen. This early pen featured a reservoir for holding ink and used gravity to draw ink toward the nib. Although there is scant evidence of this pen's exact mechanism or design, it's a fascinating glimpse into the early human desire for a cleaner, more efficient writing tool. Still, this invention was far from the widely used fountain pens we know today, and it wasn't until centuries later that the concept began to take more defined shape. The next significant step in the evolution of the fountain pen came during the Renaissance period. In the 17th century, European inventors began to experiment with various designs that could potentially house ink inside a pen. One early example came from a German inventor named Daniel Schwenter, who devised a crude form of a fountain pen using two quills, one serving as a reservoir inside the other. Ink would flow from the inner quill to the outer one as the user wrote. While an innovative idea, this version of the fountain pen was still flawed due to ink leakage and inconsistent flow. However, it demonstrated that the idea of a self-contained pen was becoming increasingly prevalent, driven by the growth of literacy and the burgeoning intellectual movements of the time. Despite these early attempts, it was not until the 19th century that the fountain pen truly began to evolve into a practical, widely accessible tool. The key innovations during this period were the refinement of materials and the improvement of ink flow mechanisms. Early 19th century pens used a dip-and-write mechanism, but they still had issues with ink leakage, poor air circulation, and unreliable flow control. What the fountain pen needed to succeed was a mechanism that could consistently manage ink flow without excessive leakage. Enter the era of the Industrial Revolution, an age of innovation that transformed almost every facet of life, including writing technology. In 1827, a French government official named Pétrarche Poinaré took a crucial step forward in fountain pen design by patenting a pen with a replaceable ink cartridge. Poinaré's design allowed users to refill the pen more easily, making it much more practical. However, even his design suffered from the same problem: ink leakage. The solution to this problem would come in the form of two critical inventions. First, the creation of rubber sacks for storing ink, and second, the incorporation of a feed system that allowed air to circulate properly and control the ink flow. The real breakthrough came with Lewis Waterman, an American insurance broker frustrated with the limitations of existing writing tools. In 1884, Waterman patented his design for a capillary feed fountain pen, which became the most influential development in the history of this tool. Waterman's pen had an ink reservoir inside the barrel and a 3-channel feed that controlled the flow of ink using gravity and capillary action. This solved the issues of inconsistent flow and leakage that plagued previous designs. Waterman's pen became widely popular because it was dependable, convenient, and did not require frequent dipping in ink. His design set the standard for all future fountain pens, cementing his legacy as one of the most important figures in the pen's evolution. The 20th century saw the refinement and mass adoption of the fountain pen. With the development of new materials like celluloid and the introduction of metal alloys, fountain pens became more durable and affordable for a wider audience. The introduction of the self-filling pen in the early 1900s made fountain pens even more convenient. Self-filling mechanisms like the lever filler, button filler, and eventually the piston filler allowed users to refill their pens without the need for separate ink cartridges. These innovations made the fountain pen a staple of everyday life, used by students, professionals, and writers alike. Major companies like Parker, Schaefer, and Montblanc emerged during this period, each bringing their own variations of the fountain pen to market, often competing over both functionality and aesthetic appeal. However, the reign of the fountain pen as the dominant writing instrument began to wane with the invention of the ballpoint pen in the 1930s. Ballpoint pens were cheaper to produce, less prone to leaking, and required less maintenance than fountain pens. By the 1960s, the ballpoint pen had largely replaced the fountain pen in everyday use. However, the fountain pen never disappeared. Instead, it found a new niche as a luxury item, a symbol of sophistication and a tool for those who appreciated fine writing instruments. Companies like Montblanc and Pelikan continued to produce high-quality fountain pens, often marketed as premium products that emphasized craftsmanship, design, and heritage. In recent years, fountain pens have seen a resurgence in popularity. Part of this is driven by a growing appreciation for analog tools in an increasingly digital world. Writing with a fountain pen offers a tactile experience that ballpoints and computers simply can't replicate. Enthusiasts argue that the smooth flow of ink, the elegance of the nib, and the physical connection between the pen, ink, and paper make fountain pens a joy to use. Furthermore, fountain pens have become collectible items, with vintage pens fetching high prices among collectors. Modern fountain pen makers such as Lamy, Pilot, and TWSBI cater to this renewed interest by offering pens that blend traditional craftsmanship with contemporary design. The evolution of the fountain pen is a story of human creativity and the desire for elegance and practicality in daily life. From its humble origins as a quill pen that needed to be dipped in ink every few minutes, to its development into a sophisticated, self-contained writing instrument, the fountain pen has undergone significant transformation. It has survived through centuries of innovation and technological advancement, from the medieval scribes of the Renaissance to modern-day writers who appreciate the art of handwriting. Today, the fountain pen stands as both a historical artifact and a modern tool, appreciated for its beauty, precision, and the sense of connection it provides between the writer and their words. In an age of emails and instant messaging, the fountain pen serves as a reminder of the craftsmanship and care once required to put ink to paper, an enduring testament to the art of writing itself. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the history of simple things. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories woven through the smallest details.